Adam Caplan is here. Don't forget, listen to the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms and check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. All right, Adam, you don't get to be on the reaction day all that often, but if there was a day to be on the reaction day, it's probably after a night like last night. The Eagles lose at home to the Falcons, and everybody wants to point the finger. It's Sirianni. It's the play call. You got to catch the ball. It's the defense. There's no pass rush. Man, a team that had good vibes last week, Adam, just like that, the vibes have changed pretty quickly, didn't they?
Well, Mike, it's interesting. So you and I, we did our usual Friday segment on Football at 4, and we didn't know about A.J. Brown's injury. You know, we didn't know. And they would add him after Friday's practice. And then, Mike, they had to give a designation on Saturday, was the last day of practice, and it said questionable. And on Sunday, which, never happens, they downgraded him to out. And I remember thinking, boy, this is we saw what happened against Tampa Bay last year was awful. And I know this is a new scheme, and we know what happened last year. That scheme was bad, and there were a lot of issues last year. But I'm thinking, all right, well, Kellen Moore, this is a tough challenge for him. This is the first big one. I'd expect it to be great, but there were issues, Mike, last night, which we'll certainly get into. And I still thought they'd win. Now, I thought the game would be pretty close. And it was, and I didn't think, in fact, I thought Atlanta would wind up covering that 6 points. Actually went down to 5.5. But it was a very odd game, Mike. There were a lot of subplots. And as you know, you never know quite, you think you know what it'll look like going into it, but certain things happen that were kind of interesting.
Well, let's look at the offense. No A.J. Brown, and obviously everybody looks at certain things, but let's look at why not having A.J. Brown last night. We know he's A.J. Brown, but glaring last night it seemed.
Yeah, look, Jahan Dotson, as we knew, was going to get the start. He had one target. He caught it for 6 yards. He played a lot of snaps. He was a non-factor. You know, he's been a motion player the first 2 weeks. They don't throw in the ball. The knock that we reported at the time, of the issues that the former team that he played for had with him is he didn't play through contact real well, had trouble getting open, and it's only 2 weeks, so we don't have enough information on it, but he's been a non-factor so far. I know it's a new offense. We have to give him time. But with Brown telling ESPN's Lisa Soldiers, by the way, from Philly, that he's going to miss a couple games, as I understand it, it's probably there is a chance he's not back till the bye, after the bye, Mike, as you know. They play this week and they have the bye, so there's a chance he's not back. I guess it would be week 6. So, look, we'll see. Hamstrings are careful with this stuff. And AJ apparently told her that it's going to be a couple weeks, so if we extrapolate, that means he probably wouldn't play against Tampa next week. So it's a problem. Yeah, we knew they played more 12 personnel. That was a layup call. But one of the many issues I had, Mike, last night, and I really thought Goddard would be a big part of the passing game. We should mention, we have our Tuesday night with Greg Cosell with our Patreon members where they get to ask him anything. I got 20 questions for him tonight. That's, by the way, patreon.com/Inside the Birds. I want to know, Mike, this is what I can't answer yet. The reason why Hurts was holding on to the football were guys not getting open, was Hurts, or guys were getting open, he wasn't throwing it like last year. We saw way too much of that, him holding on to the ball too long. And how in the world Dallas Goedert doesn't get the ball a lot last night is beyond me. I know they have two great safeties. I get it. The middle of the field's a problem, and it has been with Hurts because he doesn't like to throw it in the middle. But you got to scheme Goddard open, and if you do, the quarterback's got to get him the football. So that to me I had a real problem with that. You know, and then Calcaterra has a couple catches early, then he becomes a non-factor. He's not physical. He doesn't block very well. Mike, this is, and we'll get to the defense later, which that could actually take 3 hours. We don't have that kind of time. But the offense, Mike, was very disappointing. I've been a Kellen Moore supporter, and I still will be. But I thought he could have done a better job of getting guys open.
All right. The tight end thing, it seems like every week it's, this is the Goddard week, this is the Goddard week. Yeah. It just seems that Goddard, not a part of the offense for whatever reason. Now, it's funny because what about the running backs and getting them involved in the pass game? The funny part is the biggest play of the game everybody's talking about is they threw the ball to the running back, but that was about it.
Yeah, and by the way, that's exactly the right call. You can't predict a guy dropping a ball. Mike, you could have caught that, okay?
Yes, I would have. I would have.
Yeah. And I didn't see it. Maybe you did. Apparently, in social media during the game, I didn't see this. So apparently, ESPN put a stat up. Barkley, the most drops of any running back in the NFL over the last 4 seasons. That's not good.
Well, I think there is some context to that, though, is how many targets did he get? You know, did he have the most drops, but does he have double the target? I don't know what that number is, but I have seen the drop thing.
But, Mike, you can't – but the problem is it's still too many drops.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we had Colin Thompson on earlier, and he kind of highlighted that, you know, the way his hand placement was, he didn't really have his hand placement the right way to catch that ball cleanly.
Then not good. Colin would know as a tight end. He knows that can't happen. So that was disappointing. Barkley, by the way, he looked great running the football. Here's the good thing. Their running game is good. That's not a problem. The lack of explosive plays in the pass game, I know that without A.J. Brown, it's going to be a problem. No duh. But you got to get guys open. The lack of a passing game, under 200 yards, the amount of times that Hurts dropped back. And I know, look, we're going to find out tonight whether some of that's on Hurts or not. But, look, they ran the ball really well. Now, another thing, which I'm not sure if we're going to get into this, but I want to mention it, 13 carries is too much for Hurts. I know that they weren't all called runs. We know that. Sometimes the pocket broke down and he ran. He got forced a couple times when they gave up pressure. He ran. But you can't ask your quarterback to run. He just can't run the ball 13 times. And now, by the way, the protection for the most part was outstanding. That was not a problem. So there were some positives. I know people don't want to hear any positives when their team loses. They want to hear they want everybody fired. You should have seen our live stream we did last night. The comments were just ridiculous. They want the owner to sell the team. They want the GM fired. They want the head coach fired. They want Kellen Moore demoted. I mean, it's so typical of our market. We love it. We try to calm people down. You know,
we always say, all right, there's somebody to blame here. Everybody loves the blame game, and people generally, from my experience in doing this over the years, the coach is always at the top. So when you look at that third down play, Adam Caplan, you say you got to run the ball, or hey, I don't mind that play call, end that game, put them out of their misery, trust your star running back.
By the way, Mike, the Green Bay game, when they had to get that first down, when they threw it, I couldn't believe it. Let's not forget. People are forgetting about that. That was a ballsy call. What if they doesn't get completed last week? Let's not forget about that pass in the fourth quarter to help seal that win. So, that by the way, the pass is right at him. He can't drop it. Absolutely the call.
Well, listen, and I look at this at both sides. If they don't have any timeouts, if you run the ball on third down and you don't get it, at least you kill 40 seconds of the clock.
Yeah, they had no timeouts left. So, and I had an argument with a friend of mine from another team. He goes, look, you got to be conservative in that area. I'm like, what? Why? Why the hell would you be conservative? And by the way, but just execute the damn. It's one thing. You could always do hindsight. Well, what if they got pressured? Well, they didn't. I mean, that's just that kind of thinking, the provincial thinking. I have a real problem with. But now, if you want to talk about earlier in the game, taking points off the board and going for it 4th and 4, I would agree with those people of taking the field goal like that. That's fine. But other stuff before we get to defense. Mike Britton Covey very active. In fact, he lost 2 catches, Mike, due to penalty. In fact, there were 9 penalties in this game. Covey lost at least 2 plays.
3 of them were illegal man downfield,
which you can't have. Now here's what I checked into this. On RPOs, Mike, the offensive linemen have no idea what it is. Like, they know it's an RPO, but they have no idea whether Hurts it's going to be a pass or a run. So they have to hold their block long enough. And I don't want to get too technical here, but there's things called surface blocks. You have to hold it a certain amount of time before you can move downfield. And we saw this 2 years ago where they were having real problems with it, Mike, if you recall. And then they cleared it up. Now, the league over-officiates this stuff early in the season. They'll go over it. I don't expect to be a problem going forward, Mike. But the 9 penalties, look, that was painful. You think about how many issues this team had last night, they still should have won the game.
Oh, no doubt. Listen, they gave up 15 points as we transition to the defense. Down to that final drive, you've only given up 15. You're saying, look, my defense is giving me a chance to win this game until the last drive. The lack of pass rush all night long, but that last drive, it really stood out.
Mike, I don't want to hear from Sirianni talking about, they were in a bunch of, 3rd and shorts, obviously because the run defense was awful, which we'll get to in a minute, but what Nick fails to realize and won't admit is we all have we all have the gift of sight, right? We could see it. There's no pass rush.
None.
I mean, if you told me Bryce Huff didn't play for the Eagles, I would agree with you.
Adam, I didn't know what I was not joking when I said this last night. I didn't know what jersey number he was because I haven't seen him on the field do anything. And I'm like, man, what number does he wear? And sure enough, it's apropos. He wears 0.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because I used to know every Eagles number for years without looking. I know maybe 4 or 5 of them. And I know a bunch of change. Players are now more or less be able to pick their own number, so it's really hard. I saw the back of his jersey a couple times, but you never noticed him. I know this is a new scheme. He didn't have a good training camp, other than that week against New England, where he had a good practice, a joint practice. Game was good. It's been disappointing. I know it's not they don't run wide 9 here. They run some 9 technique, but it's not anything like he did with the Jets. So this is a new experience for him. We had Ryan Silverfield on, his head coach from Memphis, former head coach. Well, he's Memphis head coach, but his coach when he was there at Memphis. And so we had him on our platform back in, I think, in July. Ryan spoke very highly of him. He said, really conscientious guy, really hard worker, cares. So I'm thinking at some point this is going to work, Mike. But if we're having this talk in midseason and he's been a disaster, you're going to start talking about $34 million fully guaranteed at signing down the tubes. And look, Mike, I'm just going to mention this right now. They've got a bunch of guys who are not performing. Nolan Smith not performing at all. He's another guy you have a hard time seeing. Jalen Carter, very inconsistent. Jordan Davis, mostly a non-factor so far. This can't happen, Mike. I mean, if you want to know why their defense is struggling, Josh Sweat is not done much at all. He regressed late last season. It's still a problem. I don't know if one good pass rusher they have. I mean, really, Brandon Graham gives him what he can.
Well, if Brandon Graham is your best pass rusher at the end of the night, or when you're saying we need pass rush from Brandon Graham, you got problems.
36 years old, Mike, and we love BG, but that can't be your answer. They've got a problem. We'll get to the run defense in a second. But Huff at $17 million a year, only getting 32 snaps out of 61. I don't need a guess here, Mike. That's Vic Fangio is telling you I don't want him on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be any. You cannot argue that point. It's not like Bryce Huff is hurt. He only got 32 snaps last night when they needed him, Mike. Jalen Carter also had his snaps cut down a little bit. Thomas Booker you saw, and I only played 9 snaps, but he had some productive snaps.
I said earlier, and Mosher texted me,
okay.
Booker was the best player on the field.
Did a good job. He's got great energy. What a really nice story. We don't bash the Eagles. We tell the truth. We get comments every now and then on our YouTube page that we're so negative. We bring up all this negative stuff. Our job is to educate people. We also give a lot of positives out. That's why we hired Greg Cosell. That's why he works for us. Greg tells you the truth. By the way, Greg loved Jordan Davis for the first 5 or 6 weeks. He called me personally last year to tell me, he said, we have to talk about Jordan Davis on our pregame show. I am stunned at how well he's playing. And then Jordan Davis regressed completely, and he's never been the same, Mike. So they've got problems, Mike. They've got significant problems on defense. The one thing I will say, their coverage, of course, obviously, Darnell Mooney beat him. That was bad, and you can't ignore that. The last drive, you can't ignore it. That cost them the game. But overall, the coverage for the most part, Mike, has been pretty good.
All right, let's get into the run defense. You mentioned the young players are not performing.
Yeah.
There's some of those guys up front. The high-priced players are not performing. There's some of those guys up front. But you got the linebackers. Vaughn was a big topic of conversation the week before. Some bad run fits last night.
Yeah, that's what I wrote in my notes to you, Mike. The run fits, I was told about an hour ago, were really bad again. It's crazy. And we'll talk more about this on Friday for the Sunday show, for the Sunday game at the Saints. The Falcons are running very close to the same scheme. It's West Coast, it's inside zone, it's outside zone. The Eagles played the same scheme in Week 1 with Matt LaFleur running an old school West Coast offense, running his version of Shanahan's offense. It's crazy. These West Coast schemes now are the rage. The Eagles face it. In fact, Liam Cohen, who they face in 2 weeks, runs his version of McVay. And Mike, until they figure this out, the run defense, it's going to gash them. And you notice how they'll run totally to the right and the run is to the left. It's really bad, Mike, and this was not a great game for Bond. Let's call it like it is. It was not as good as last week. I'm really interested to see, Mike, what Vic Fangio does with complete control of what he wants. He could do whatever he wants. Does he start benching players if this continues?
Yeah, I mean, because you have a situation where you're not getting pass rush, so some of those guys, you can't blame Bryce Huff and all the time. He's not on the field, so your run guys, they're not doing a good job. Your linebackers, I don't know what you thought of Dean and Bond last night, but obviously they had a rough day in terms of yardage. And then you flip it over and say, all right, we're not getting pass rush. We're not going good against the run. What'd you think of the secondary and the coverage?
Yeah, I thought, Mike, again, for the most part, I mean, they blanketed him for 3 quarters. I mean, the Darnell Mooney one, obviously Gardner Johnson's got to make the tackle. They really shut down pretty much everything. Kyle Pitts was a non-factor till late. Drake London didn't do anything until his touchdown. The coverage, look, their red zone defense also very good for the most part. The red zone defense for 2 weeks has been very solid. There are actually some positives, but because of the meltdown on the last drive, which, Mike, I remember the picket fence defense, which we remember from years ago. But man, overall, Mike, the run defense is killer. Lack of pass rushers are going to get them. If you have this kind of pass rush against New Orleans, they're going to give up 40 plus. I mean, that Derek Carr is really taking the offense that Clint Kubiak is running. So they've got a lot of corrections and is also on a short week.
They do, and this all of a sudden is a team that I think when we went back to the schedule back in May when it came out, you looked at Atlanta, okay, yep. New Orleans, Tampa. This stretch all of a sudden seems a lot different. You know, sometimes it's when you play teams. These teams are confident right now.
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, there are only 4 undefeated teams in the NFL. The Eagles are playing them back-to-back in the Saints and the Bucks. In the NFC. I think they're 5 in the AFC. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. You're playing 2 similar offenses, which have given the Eagles trouble, particularly against the run. So look, it was a bad loss, but the funny thing is if Barkley catches it, I think there's a very good chance they're going to win. But it doesn't ignore the issues that they have. Now, it's only 2 weeks. The division is terrible. Mike, this division, this NFC least, it looks as bad as you and I have been doing these segments for 6 or 7 years. This is as bad as I've seen it. It's really bad.
Yeah, well, you had Dallas awful the other day, Washington
terrible.
And New York terrible, and then Philadelphia. What I want to ask you is, did the game, the way they lost last night, Hurts with the late interception, the defense breaking down, feel a lot like the way they lost games at the end of last year?
I know people are bringing it up, Mike. Obviously, the thing is I don't see it quite like that, Mike. I'm not there yet. It's only one game. I need more information. We only have 2 games, so people are trying to make a lot of broad statements. I understand why you would say that. You're not the only one who's asked me that. I'm not there yet. Is it a bad loss? Of course it was. It was a terrible loss. But the thing is, the losing 6 out of 7. Some of those games are not competitive. This game was competitive. I mean, the Cardinal game, they were terrible defensively. You saw what happened, Mike, in the playoffs against Tampa. They were not competitive against Tampa. Let's call it like it was. They were not competitive. We're not there yet, obviously. If the bottom falls out, then we're looking at a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Take the points early in the game, or that's who they are?
Oh, boy. That's a tough question, Mike. What are your thoughts on that?
I think early in the game, I mean, you're at home. I feel like you take the points and just, it's when it's funny because I said earlier, it's almost like Sirianni's getting criticized for trusting his players. You know what I mean? Like he has trust in his players, so he throws a pass on 3rd down when really, you probably run the ball and let the clock run. Because let me ask you this. So they throw the ball 3rd down and 3, and Barkley drops it. Do you run the ball, kill the clock, and then if you like that play, you have it in your pocket for fourth down and just end it there, or do you take the points again? Like when they kicked it there, did you think they were going to go for it on fourth or just take the points on fourth down and then make Atlanta have to score a touchdown?
No. See, again, as I said earlier, first of all, I'm throwing that football because, you could always also run it and try it, and they ran the ball well. But it was perfectly executed. The running back dropped the football. Now, let's go back to the first quarter. I understand why people generally in the first quarter, early in the game, you just take the points. But it's on your point about Sirianni. He's super aggressive down. It also, we should mention, I forgot to mention this, it's what the analytical data tells you. If it tells you that the percentage is 80% if you go for it or if you throw in the situation, you do that. I know old school should, no, you should never do that early in the first quarter. You take the points in the fourth quarter, then you throw it. That's what the old schoolers want. So it depends. I'm a data person, so I want what the analytical data tells me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember arguing with someone with the Eagles back in 2017. Obviously, it's their Super Bowl year, but when I just felt like there was a time when they went on it. It might have been against the Giants where they went for it. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why they would go for it? And now I will tell you, they wound up being right about it. But yes, we have access to the results, so it turned out to be the right decision.
Sure.
But again, Mike, it's up to the individual. If you're just asking for an opinion, my opinion was I probably would have kicked the field goal. Or I would not have done what Nick did early on, gone for the field goal. But you made a very astute point. Nick has this total belief in his players to execute. I'm going to be interested to see what happens here but here's the other thing, Mike. Without A.J. Brown, it's a different ball game, folks. You can't be as daring because their pass game is really regressed. Without him, we only have access to 2 games, and it was bad in both games.
All right, Adam Caplan, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Eagles 22-21, a lot of decisions being second-guessed, a lot of players that had plays to make, didn't get it done, and now on to New Orleans. We'll talk to Adam on Friday to get us ready for that one. Adam Caplan, thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Caplan, everybody from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com.